Boop, 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 boop. Eventually, for those of you who jump in early, I gotta get some like intro music or something to kind of like fill this like few seconds or a minute of time that I'm waiting for people to kind of log on and also while I'm checking to make sure that the streams are all working. Let's take a look. Yep, looks like we're good on LinkedIn. Fantastic. Feel free to drop anything in the chat. I love the love. Always appreciate love. But let's see. Make sure that we got everything good here. Okay. Oh. Okay. Looks like we're good there. What's interesting? Let's see. Yeah. Oh my God. Man, sound sounds good too. Okay. Perfect. Okay. I'm going to check the last thing, which is on Twitter. So yeah, wrote an article yesterday about the supposed Globus NuVasive acquisition. So there were some reports that this was going to happen. And of course these things like rumors and reports come out. But there was a reason why I thought it was important to write an article about this one because of the implications it has on surgical robotics. So for those who are not familiar, Globus is a robotic spine company, okay, who have also like their own hardware and I guess some implants and everything. NuVasive, who's actually down here in SoCal, is considered, you can call it, say, a full line spine company. So they have, of course, they started out with implants and hardware, but they've also become more of a tech company because they have things like their navigation platform and everything. Why is this interesting? Okay. The reason why this is interesting is that one, this is a pretty big acquisition. Not as big as something like when Medtronic acquired, Covidian back when they did it for like what, 48 million in cash. But this is still rather large because NuVasive is a pretty big company. Both of them are publicly traded. NuVasive is a really big company. Globus is a pretty big company. Both of whom I guess combined market cap is like, I don't know, 11 or 12 billion. Right. So either way, that's a sizable acquisition because they're pretty close in size. What's interesting though that I didn't realize is that Globus's market cap in the past year, the pandemic's been hard for a lot of companies. Globus has been able to rebound back, which I found it very surprising because they're a capital equipment company mainly, right? And I need to check where most of that revenue is coming from, but their shares are up 10% to date. NuVasive, though, is down 2% to date, and they're getting close to where they were in February of 2020 when the lockdown still happened, right? So that's kind of interesting. But the other thing is that if these two, players combine, and in my article, again, you can see that on my profile, or if you look at the State of MedTech newsletter, you'll see it there. What's interesting is that when they combine, they'll own about 60%, 70%, 17% market share in the world of spine. Why is that important? Well, because that's going to be the biggest spine company on planet Earth. That's going to be bigger than Medtronic's spine division, Johnson & Johnson, a lot of people. And by the way, people, I appreciate the quietness. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people on this because I figured just because I put these two names behind me, people are going to chime in. Feel free to drop some questions in the chat because I can see it and I'm happy to answer questions live. So anyway, why is that? The reason why this is interesting is like not because like, oh, this is going to be a big player and competitor to Medtronic and Johnson. It's more specific to what does it mean for robotics? Okay, now I pulled up some data here from Alira Health, ALIRA. They are not a sponsor. They have a great executive report on robotics. I recommend checking it out. But look at these stats, okay? And again, the one thing I would say about data is that the farther out you're trying to predict, the less likely you're going to be correct. But there's a reason why I think this is interesting to look at. Okay, so 2020, if you look at robotics, surgical robotics, you can break it down into three categories where revenue is coming from. Okay, I'm going to move over a little bit. Instruments and accessories, okay? Systems where they're actually selling the robot, and services. Okay, services mean literally the service contract to, update the robot, fix anything hardware-wise, software-wise, right? Now, instruments and accessories, again, that's where you can see implants, disposables, etc. Services, what's interesting about the services side is that This is actually a huge revenue driver for a lot of companies. Like if you look at Intuitive's annual report, almost a third, and remember, Intuitive did billions of dollars in revenue last year. A third of their revenue is actually coming from servicing a robot, right? So this is big. Okay, now let's look at these numbers. 2020, this is how the numbers shook out in terms of if you look at the total surgical robotics market. This is not just spine. This is all surgical robotics. Okay. Um, but what we see is that 51% of that revenue came from instruments and accessories, 32% came from systems, okay, 17% came from services, okay. Not too surprising, and that sort of fits what we call the razor blade model in med device, right? I'm going to sell you a razor, you're going to buy it, but then the real value for me is that I'm going to continue selling the razor blade to you, right? So there's like hardware along with disposable. Here's what's interesting though. Okay. 2030, so 10 years from now, which 10 years is really not that far away. What they're predicting is instruments and accessories are going to go up from 51% to 58%. Okay, in terms of the percentage of the revenue that robotics will see. Systems will decrease from 32 to 26. Services will decrease from 17 to 16. Why is this important? Well, when you connect the dots, right, it makes complete sense why Globus is wanting to buy a company like NuVasive. And even though Globus, again, I have a lot of respect for Globus, by the way. Even though I started my career in Missouri Robotics, we were competitors to these guys. I respect what they've done. I really do. Okay. Now, the reason why I say Globus needs NuVasive more than NuVasive needs Globus is this. While yes, NuVasive's shares are down. Yes, they have a smaller market cap. However, long term, this is the thing that's important, which is a big portion of what NuVasive has. Like when you think about, and NuVasive's whole, I think, tagline is like speed of innovation. So when you think about implants, biologics, hardware, all the things, that's really what NuVasive is known for, right? And they've done a good job positioning themselves as a tech company. Globus is a robotic company that happens to have implants and hardware and everything, right? And so if this trend holds true, Globus needs to, and along with a lot of other companies, need to figure out how do we supplement our revenue? Because here's what's happening. Hospitals, the good old days are unfortunately gone. And so thanks to Intuitive, most hospitals are really turned off about capital expenses because they know what it's going to cost in the long run, right? They don't like service contracts. Even physicians now, they've gotten smarter about asking questions about like, well, what about the cost of servicing the robot and everything, right? So the unfortunate thing, and this is where that article I wrote yesterday really focused on, is that I built my career in surgical robotics. I love surgical robots. And I hate to say this. It pains me. It pains me to say this, but robots being commoditized. My mentor, Chris Sells, who is the VP of sales over at Missouri Robotics, said it like 5 years ago. He's like, "The robot's going to be commodity." And he's absolutely right, because it's hardware like anything else. And this is being accelerated even more. Hold on one second, guys. Yeah, so this is being accelerated even more because there was a time when I would say 2010 to 2016, those were the great robot years, in my opinion, because you had a lot of like surgical robotic companies that were startups and upstarts and all trying to find a way of like, hey, how do we do the hard thing of selling capital equipment to a hospital without having to bundle it with all these other things? That's hard. You talk to anybody who was successful at Missouri, Globus, any of these companies early on, where you couldn't bundle the product with a bunch of other stuff, that was a hard capital sale. You had to learn persuasion with surgeons and nurses and staff, C-suite, everything. You really had to know what you're doing. Now, though, everybody needs a robot. Medtronic has a robot, Zimmer Biomet has a robot, Stryker, J&J, so on and so forth. And the robot is being used, and this is going to piss a lot of people off, it's being used as a feature to the implant business. That's right. The robot, which we all knew when Medtronic acquired Mazor, it was because that robot was going to be a Trojan horse to get the implant business in. And now, as companies get more sophisticated, especially with data like this, and I guarantee you, it wasn't Alira that thought about this first. These companies are seeing that their ability to make more money and revenue from instruments and accessories versus the systems is going to go up. Like you always need that, right? And the point is that as much as I love robotics, at the end of the day, global scale, there's been not even 5% penetration of all procedures in surgical robotics. Heck, even in general surgery alone, with all the great work that Intuitive has done, there's like 15% penetration of all procedures. So it's not a lot. So there's a lot of surgeons, the majority of the globe, who says, we can do the surgeries without a robot. Can't do the surgeries without these things, though. Just can't do that. And so the robot has now become not only a Trojan horse, but it's a feature of the instruments and the implants. Why do I say feature? Because how can you enhance the value here, right? Because if you think about value, and let's see on this side. Do I have this equation up? I don't have that equation up on the other side, unfortunately. If you think about value, okay, value is on the top. If you divide it out, on the top, it's the outcome you want multiply it by the perceived value that you're going to actually be able to do it, and divide that by the amount of time it's going to take and the effort. Long story short, and again, most people are not going to be able to think what that looks like. If you want to increase the value of something, you can't do much here. Like, sorry, implant companies, I hate to say it, most of the time, like, screw is a screw. Implant is an implant. There's not a whole lot of differentiation, right? And that's the key. Things are better, but it's like a features and benefits thing. So how do you enhance that? Hey, there's a big difference between an implant or instrument set that is one by itself versus a separate instrument and an accessory set that comes with a robot. You cannot compare those two things. It's just different, right? This is classic marketing, right? You can't compare them. That's a choice, right? So as robots become more commoditized and essentially features of the implants, this is why it's important. That's why I think Globus has, shown interest in NuVasive. I don't think it's going to be an acquisition because, again, NuVasive, if Globus was, I'm not going to mention any names, if Globus was trying to acquire just any random implant company, they could do it. No problem. Forget about market cap for a second. NuVasive, I would say, of all the spine companies, has done the best job of really developing a strong brand, a strong culture of innovation, right? Like it's an impressive organization, right? So I don't see that just happening, honestly. And what I do see, though, is a potential merger, right? That could potentially happen. I don't know, like kind of like Zimmer Biomet, but either way, that's a possibility because they're going to have to figure that out because it's very difficult to compete with the likes of like a Medtronic, Zimmer Biomet. It's just very, very hard because hospitals, there's a lot of consolidation happening. A lot of hospitals are getting bought out. Health systems are consolidating. And so these deals require very, very large like bundles, to be put together for these health systems. Now, what is interesting though, and here's a prediction if you want one, I think after the pandemic happened and a lot of physicians saw how poorly they were treated, especially a lot of physicians I know, and again, I'm not taking one side or the other. Jay, yes, I am live. Jay asked, am I live? I am live. Yes. I am in fact live right now, Jay. So it's funny, if he thought this is a recording, that probably just tripped him up a little bit. So they can't compete with those kind of companies. But what I was saying was that surgeons, I feel like, are going to band together because a lot of them I've spoken to, and again, anecdotal evidence, are getting frustrated with hospitals. They're getting burnt out. They're sick and tired of dealing with these hospitals, which again, they're large corporations. A lot of them, like somebody told me the other day, they're getting their pay cut by 10%. AMA, the American Medical Association, came out. They're forecasting another 9% cut across the board in 2022. So physicians are getting sick and tired of this. So it's kind of like, well, if they're going to get their pay cut, it's going to be at their hands, not by somebody else. And so a lot of them are trying to go and start their practices, start an ASC and everything. So there might be that opportunity for companies like Globus and other robotic companies to still keep the dream alive by just selling straight up robots. But long term, these kind of things are going to be important. And if you look at Steve Case wrote a book called The Third Wave of technology. The third wave, which we're in right now, is going to require a lot of strategic partnerships. Like that's what it's going to take to go far. Even these huge companies like Facebook and Google, they have to do strategic partnerships. Like that's just the world that we live in, right? One other thing that I would say is that what's interesting here is that there's a fourth category missing from this. Okay, guys? What's that fourth category? I'm going to put it right over here. Anybody want to guess? Can anybody drop in the chat? Does anyone know what the fourth category is going to be? There's a fourth category that's going to come out in terms of where revenue is coming from. Can someone please just drop in the chat? Just make a guess. Anybody? I see like 15, 16 people on LinkedIn. Somebody just make a guess. So Jay, by the way, Jamil J. Pendleton, I highly recommend you guys go follow him, especially if you're a sales rep. He just puts out amazing content. So question from Jay, talk more about the shift of cases to ASC and then the upcoming reimbursement changes and how that changes and how that relates to surgeon behavior. Damn, that's a good question. Yeah, so Jay's spot on. So fourth category, I put it. So Jay says data. I agree, but I'm sorry. Like med device companies don't know a damn thing about data yet. But I'm putting that. I'm augmenting it along with software, right? Because right now, like the hospitals, the med device companies have no data, right? With the hospitals are the ones who have all the data. And so for the med device companies to do anything with that data, they need to be able to sell very compelling software. We'll get that to that in a second. I do want to talk about the shift of cases to ASCs. Yeah, so here's a simple thing. If you go and look across the board, a lot of the studies show two very clear things. When you do surgeries, procedures in an outpatient setting or an ASC, right? Cost is going to be a lot lower, right? Like significantly lower, and quality will be better. Why would quality be better? Oh, I don't know. Who usually goes to get surgery? It's not always a young guy like me. It's usually somebody who's older. Maybe they have some comorbidities. So taking that person to a large hospital system with a lot of things like, I don't know, MRSA floating around, there's infection rates, all these things, much better in an ASC outpatient setting, right? The other thing is that because of those outcomes, I feel that, again, I don't know anything. I know very little about Medicaid and Medicare, but like most private insurances are, I believe, incentivizing people to do them in these outpatient settings, which is why I think you see a lot of hospital systems trying to go out. And again, I think it's BS. I don't agree with this. Hospital system that's going and trying to build an ASC in a new community where that community already has one ASC. Like, what are they adding to the community by adding one more ASC? Like nothing. They tried to do this in Massachusetts. I think Mass General was trying to have this big expansion. And of course, the state government shut that down really quickly. All right, Michael Spiegler. Michael, thanks for joining. Michael says, what does Michael say? I throw all under a similar umbrella: data, major tech players pushing into the fray, personalized medicine, remote monitoring. Yeah, that's true. But again, like that's a completely different topic. I'm mainly just talking about surgical robotics. So Jay, I see that you mentioned Google and Amazon. Let me take this moment to say something that will ensure that I will never get a chance to work at Google and Amazon. Like, they had so many chances to try and do something in healthcare. What have they done? Let's look at Google. Google, all due respect, they're great at raising money. Verily raised what, $1 billion? So they're great at these. Like, if you're an R&D, if you're an engineer, great place to work. What the hell have they commercialized? Not a damn thing. I don't know what the hell they've commercialized. Do you? Like, nobody does. That's Google. Amazon. Hey, do we all remember Amazon teamed up with some companies? I think you may have heard of them, JP Morgan and Berkshire Hathaway, because they said, oh, we're going to change healthcare. We're going to do this and that. 2 years in, they throw the towel in. So I think Amazon has an opportunity to disrupt things as a distributor, but in terms of like a device company, like, no, don't see it. It's just, I don't know. I mean, I guess anything's possible. The one thing, okay, so Jay, one thing I will agree with you on, like for Amazon, so companies like a Medline need to be worried about at Amazon because, at the end of the day, what Medline, which is an impressive organization, largest privately held MedTech company in the world, they've just done a really damn good job of figuring out what the market needs, seeing who moves first, then replicating that product for like a lower cost, right? Which is great, but then you don't want to be in a race to the bottom with a company like Amazon. Amazon, You can buy spine kits on Amazon, believe it or not. So that's the only thing that I would say. Now, in terms of the software and data side, I'll touch on that for the last part of this segment, and if there's any questions, just throw them in there. I think this presents an opportunity for MedTech to figure out, hey, can we innovate on the razor blade model? That has to be changed, right? And I think this is where software as a service and data comes into play. Again, MedTech companies don't have data, right? What they could do is if they present to a hospital C-suite and say, hey, because of our software, we're able to collect data on all of your cases. From those cases, we're able to help you improve your efficiencies. The surgeons love it because now, it's like being an athlete. They get performance data, et cetera, right? I think there's a variety of ways you can market it. One company that is doing surgical intelligence, and I think that they're technically the category leader for this, is Theater, Theator.io. Theator.io, really interesting company, right? So I think this concept of, getting good data, that's the key. A lot of medtech companies I remember when I was at Potrero and we were doing predictive health, we actually had data scientists at Potrero. Other medtech companies are like, oh, we have data sets. Hey, we have AI. Not the same thing. Douglas Eunice, hey, welcome. How about disposables? What about disposables? Disposables technically fall into here, instruments and accessories. But again, Douglas, I'll sort of riff on that a bit. That's another model that a lot of hospitals don't like. Ambu is doing a very interesting job. So Ambu has a disposable endoscope, right? Which is very interesting because it's a big deal when it comes to infection rates. But you have other companies. I know there's a Swiss spine company that they essentially lease their technology and then everything is reusable. And so there's this happy medium that people are trying to figure out between making disposables, which is better for controlling infection rates, but not very good for controlling costs, and then reusables, which are great for cost standpoint, but at the same time, you have issues with infection rates. And then also, if you think about it for a medtech company, look, let's face it, guys, it's not cheap to start a medtech company these days. Never was, never has been. And getting to the FDA hasn't gotten any easier. I'm going to take a few more questions on the topic, but yeah, check out the article. I would really encourage you guys and hope you can go leave a comment on the article. You can find it on my page, on my LinkedIn page, that is, because I am curious what you guys think. But again, the sad thing is that robots are becoming commoditized. They're essentially becoming features of the implants that are being used with them. The plus side is that if the industry gets its act together, we can find a way to actually figure out how to sell software. And I think that that's going to require a lot of investment, not just on R&D side, but the moment you go into software, look, anybody who's in surgical robotics, you know what I'm talking about. This is not an easy area to recruit for. Engineers who know how to do computer vision, for example, develop algorithms, data science, it's extremely competitive because we're competing with Google and Facebook and everybody, right? So I think the one competitive edge that MedTech has, though, is that this is a really rewarding field. Look, I spent a year in the fintech SaaS world. Granted, it was healthcare, but the MedTech arena, you feel really good about what you do. Whether you're in marketing or sales or something, because you're doing things that are going to actually impact patient care versus going and working for a social media company to figure out how do I keep people on for an extra 10 seconds so advertisers can sell more stuff to them, so I don't know. But one thing I'll mention, for those who are investors who are listening, there's one conference coming up that I'm going to be at. I really recommend it. It's probably the best conference I've been to honest to God. It's called the Life Science Intelligence Summit. It's put on by the LSI group. That's Scott Pentel's group. They're doing it again here in Dana Point at the Monarch this year. Last year was at the Ritz, this year at the Monarch. It is a classy event, but it's all medtech startups, plus the strategics and investors are there. I think it's a great place to get really the pulse of medtech and figure out what's going on, what happened last year, what's going to go on this year. And it's just really, the number of presentations and pitches you see, it's just a great conference. But I mentioned that because last year someone talked about this issue as well, which is Is someone in MedTech going to finally figure out how to come up with a sustainable software, model, business model, or is someone from the SaaS world going to come in and do that? And I have a feeling somebody from the SaaS world is going to end up doing it. I hope, MedTech companies start figuring out how they can do this, because it's going to require more than just taking the data that you have in house and applying machine learning and saying, hey, look, we got something really interesting. Like, nobody cares about that. So I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover today. Let's see. Anybody got any other questions? And I can take questions. It doesn't have to be about this. I'm trying to do more of these live streams because I find them to be a lot of fun and people seem to enjoy them. Anything else? Going once, going twice. All right. I think that covers it for today. Thank you all for thanks for everybody who joins on these live. If you enjoyed this, like, hey, reshare this to your LinkedIn or Twitter feed, or however you're watching this. If you can share it, I'd really appreciate it. That's how I reach new audiences. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.